One particular evening, thank God we weren't asleep, but on this particular evening we saw headlights outside. He'd followed me several carriages down and then had sat next to me. Hey everyone, when you leave the house, and let's say if you're into bags, you've got your bag with you, or if you're into watches, you've got your watch with you, are you necessarily safe? I've had 4 things happen to me in the past which I've learnt from, and what's really interesting is I think that there's a thought that maybe social media for any of us, I know loads of you, I follow you back, and loads of us who are into this kind of stuff, you will share your pictures of what you've got and how you're styling it, and likewise I do too. And there's a thought that maybe social media can, when you leave the house, make you more of a risk. Well, actually, possibly. But I actually think that there's a flip side to this. The things I'm going to tell you are things that have all happened to me like years before even Instagram existed. I've got a couple of friends that are really into expensive watches, and actually one guy who is not on social media at all, he went on holiday with his wife. This happened a few years ago. And when he came back, their house had been burgled and the thieves went for the watches. That's all they took, was the watches. They knew where they were, they cleared out all of it. And the only thing he could assume is that how would they even know he lived there? And he said he can only assume it was via someone that he knew. So that's what I mean. And I'm not doing this to scare anyone. It's just kind of, I thought it would be quite interesting. The first thing that happened to me happened probably, when did it happen? Probably in 2007. And I'd gone to the gym one evening. I went to the boot of my car. I put in my car my handbag. I also took out my gym kit. There was no one around, but obviously there was no one around. I was in the gym and the receptionist came and found me and said, your car alarm's going off and someone's broken into the back of your car. I don't know if any of you have been broken into before when it's your car, but you know how for a minute you think, no, what? The back windscreen's gone? No, I'm imagining that. They'd lifted up that parcel shelf on the back, they grabbed my bag and then they'd done a runner. What was kind of funny in the end is that the bag was really inexpensive, although at the time it was my favourite bag, so I felt really upset for losing it. But I remember, before I'd put the bag in the car, I'd taken out my phone, and in doing so, I'd kind of tipped the bag upside down and I'd emptied everything in the back of the car. So he didn't get my wallet, he didn't get my phone because I had it with me. All he got actually was the empty bag, but it cost me money having to fix the rear windscreen. What that taught me, and this is a tip that I've got to share with you guys, whenever I'm putting anything in and out of the car and then I'm going to walk away from the car and do whatever it is I'm doing, I never go to the boot, put the thing in and then go, because I've learnt my lesson on that. The second thing that happened, this happened as well way before I was on social media. This must have been, I don't know, 2009 or something. I was at a work meeting and I'd gone to get the tube back to the office, and I'd gone down to the tube, which I've used a million times. I had with me at the time, if I've got a picture of it, I'll insert it here. I had this tote bag from Dior. I was on the platform waiting for the tube and this guy walked over to me and asked for the time. I didn't have an expensive watch, nothing like that. Bags were my thing. Told him the time, and then a moment later I was looking at the board to see when the train was coming, and I noticed the time was like really big on the board, and I was like, well, of course, it's always there. I had a feeling about him, so when the tube came, I walked right down the platform and I got on one of the carriages that was further up, like lots of carriages further up. This is where it creeps me out. I walked in, sat down, and as the tube went through the tunnel and the outside got dark, it's got reflections of whoever's next to you. I looked in the reflection and this guy was wearing a red tartan type baggy shirt, and I saw he was next to me. I hadn't even, he'd followed me several carriages down and then had sat next to me, and I saw this reflection and my heart was like this, because I thought, he is definitely going to rob me. That's what this is about. And I acted like I didn't realise what was going on. Got off the tube, he followed me. And everyone was walking up the stairs to get out of the tube. And I turned around and I looked him straight in the eye, and he looked me straight in the eye. I didn't want to walk up the steps to go outside in case he then followed me to where the agency was, which was in quite a quiet area, and I just thought, I don't want to get in a situation with you. Can you believe it? I was looking everywhere for someone that worked down there. There was no one. I ended up, instead of going up the stairs, I ended up walking onto the other platform to go the way I didn't want to go, which was back the way I'd come. Came up the steps to get out of the tube. By this point, I'm in the completely wrong area that I need to be on. I don't want to go back and get on the tube because this creep's down there. And I ended up having to walk like quite a distance to get to where I needed to be. And I was paranoid that the guy was following me. I know that saying's rubbish, but life is short. And what is the point of buying nice things if you have to keep them inside your house and never wear them and crack them out every so often to go to a party or something, which in COVID times isn't going to happen? I kind of am of that thought. I don't know how many of you know what I mean, but I think if you can't use it, what's the point of even buying it in the first place? So now what I do is I do still use my stuff, but I'm very aware of who is around me, and I don't go to places where there are not crowds. Even in a crowd, these people will still pickpocket you. So when I go on the tube now or the train or anything, I have nothing in my pockets and I hug my bag like this. Sometimes I will even put it under my coat if it's the winter and I've got a coat on. Another very similar thing that happened before I tell you about the final, and again, as I say, this is all long before I was on social media. The other thing that happened, which I did a video on actually, which was another thing that really scared me to death, is I was working late at one particular place. I came out of the office, I was the last person, so I locked up, came out of the office, it was winter, so it was dark early. There was a couple across the road who were having an argument. Again, can you believe it? No one around. I remember thinking that's really weird that they're having an argument, and as I came out of the office and walked down the road, to which there was a car park just near, which my car was in, their argument stopped, but they both stood still, kind of facing each other. But you know when you kind of just get that feeling, you know, you're just like, okay, something's up with those two. The car park was down, honestly, down a hill that was like this. And where I used to work at the time, this was my thing at the time, I wore platform heel boots everywhere. And I'm going down a hill like this. It's freezing, it's pitch black, there's like ice on the pavement, and I'm in platforms that are like this. The girl disappeared and the guy started following me down the hill. I don't know what happened, but I turned around at one point and he wasn't there, but he'd definitely been following me. I ran to the car park, got in my car, had to pay to get out of the car park, and the payment meter was right at the entrance where he'd followed me. What was also creepy is there was a playground area just outside the car park, which was dark because there was no street lights down there, and I could hear the swing going. Well, it sounded like that, you know, that kind of screeching noise as a swing was going. So what I'm trying to say is that all of us have to be careful. Like, if you're watching this thinking, yeah, I've got nice stuff, but I'm not on social media, so I'm safe. Don't want to scare any of you, but actually, most of the time we aren't. It's when you go out in public, and particularly if you're in an area where there's not many people, that is when you find yourself in shtuck, as I found out. Two more things. One was years ago, I think I told you, Dave and I bought this Lamborghini, and we lived in a really quiet area at the time. No crime whatsoever. One particular evening, thank God we weren't asleep, but on this particular evening we saw headlights outside, and when we looked out there was one of those Audi RS6s, which actually they're quite aggressive looking cars anyway, and a group of very well dressed boys got out of the car, looked underneath the car, like got on the floor and looked underneath the car, looked up, saw us looking out, didn't care, got back in the Audi and drove off. It made us terrified because we like immediately were thinking, why would they do that? How are these people? How do they know this car is even there? I phoned the police and the police told us that what they would have been looking for was jacking points under the car. So you know how there's like points under the car where you can put one of those like hook things that come down and they go on 4 corners of the car and then they lift the thing off onto a truck and they drive off. The police said that's what they would have been looking for. And she said, oh, she was like, don't be scared that they're gonna come back tonight. They will not. They will come back in weeks' time, maybe even a couple of months. When they think that you have forgotten about the whole thing, they'll probably come back in the day at like 10 in the morning because most people are at work. They'll do it in broad daylight, no one will question it. You'll come home and the car won't be there. And she explained, I can't remember how she said it, but she said they don't even need the keys. This is kind of what they do. Now, here was the thing. We ended up with that car that night because I was freaking out, so was David, and I said to him, I'm not comfortable going back to bed, despite what the police lady said. I'm not comfortable going back to bed with that out there because that car now feels like a liability. So we drove it and parked it somewhere secure, came back home, and we left the car in this secure car park until we knew what to do. The lady was right. Several weeks later, it wasn't in the middle of the day, it was the same time of the evening as in the evening again. The same car turned up. We're stood at the window and I'm thinking, haha, like car's gone. And do you know what? They looked, car wasn't there, and they looked back at the window and they were like, and I just like, unbelievable. And then as they drove off, they flashed their lights because we're still looking out the back window. They like flashed their lights and were like being sarcastic. And I thought, you like, what is wrong with you? So anyway, the point I'm trying to make is just be vigilant. Now here are some of the tips that I have developed since that, God willing, have kept me safe. The first thing is, I watched a program years ago to do with muggings, particularly in London, because I don't know whether it's died down a bit, but there was a spate of moped muggings. I don't know how many of you remember that, but because in London you're mainly stuck in traffic, they'll pick someone that's got something like their bag on the passenger seat. Never leave your bag on the passenger seat. They'll come over, they'll smash the window, they'll grab the bag, and they're on a moped so they can get away. You can't. So don't keep your bag on the passenger seat. I normally keep it in the back behind the passenger seat. And then one really big thing, which is actually really scary to think about, but it's, just be aware of it. When I was watching the program to do with the moped stuff, the police were explaining that there are gangs that will, what is it called? They will mark you. So they will see someone who's got a great watch that's expensive or whatever they've got, and they will then follow that person. Doesn't matter if you go out for the whole day and you're walking around the shops and you go for lunch, they will follow you everywhere. Then they will wait for a moment when you are accessible, when you can be robbed, and they will get you. And particularly things like, try and hide your watch. If you're wearing a nice watch, try and hide it. If you're wearing a bag, when you go to get some food, I always have the bag on my lap. And if it's got a crossbody, I will carry on wearing that so that it's harder to snatch. And let's say you're walking back to your car somewhere, the police also really recommend that you walk on the inside of the pavement, and that, as I mentioned, you always ideally walk in a place where there's lots of people around. I have actually had a couple of you tell me that you even take out when you're going to work, and this hasn't got anything to do with taking a nice bag out and being a target. I've had some of you tell me that you take trainers with you, and I used to do that after the thing that happened when I was walking to the car park that time. I used to wear trainers to work. I had shoes under my desk that I'd change into, and I would then wear those trainers when I went back to my car so that if I needed to run, I could. I know it's crazy, but there are weirdos out there, you never know. For any of you watching who are also thinking, well, if I become a target for this, what's the point of buying it? And therefore, you know, that's my thing in life, that's what I enjoy. This is the frustrating thing, is that if you enjoy this stuff, it's almost like, you know, what's the point of even buying it? You might as well not buy it. If you are going to a sketchy place, I never take stuff. Like when I go on holiday, I very rarely take designer bags. And if I do, I'll take a tiny one with me, and so that it fits in the hotel locker. And moreover, I normally take, say, Coach or Senreve bags because they're practical, I haven't got to worry about them getting marked up, and they're not a target for thieves. Share any tips that you have got below. I would love to hear, and maybe other people would as well. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.
you.